Hello my friends and welcome back to a new reading wrap-up video. I would like to talk about the 4 books that I read in the month of June and I hope that you enjoy. The first book that I read in June was Never Saw Me Coming by Vera Kurian. It's a psychological thriller and our main protagonist in this book is actually a psychopath, a diagnosed psychopath. But it's not somebody that you might think of when you hear the word psychopath. No, this is a young woman called Chloe Severa. Yeah, that was her name. And yeah, she's just finished high school. She's starting out in college and she's gotten into this college in Washington, D.C., just moved there and yeah. But she's a psychopath, so for her, starting out in college, it's not the same as for everybody else. So the things that are on her mind are not, okay, who do I room with? Will I find love? I don't know, what about my classes? Excitement? No, for her, what's mostly on her mind is getting revenge on somebody that she used to know from her childhood who goes to the same university. But not only that is going through her mind, because there's something else going on which has to do with a program that the university here in Washington hosts, and it's a program for psychopaths. So there are a total of 7 students on this campus that are diagnosed psychopaths that are in this program that is run by the psychology department, and yeah, they just do tests on them and log their mood logs, and the program's idea is to help these people become, I guess, functioning members of society once they leave campus. The program is also not very known. Nobody knows it exists except for the people that are working on it, and then the members, but even the members don't know each other. Something bad happens at some point in this book, and yeah, two of the students, I should say, that are in this psychopath program get killed. And yeah, so there's a killer running around and this killer seems to be targeting psychopaths. So yeah, that is the basic story, and I mean, when I read it, it sounds just so interesting. It has so much potential, so I had to pick it up. I really enjoyed this book. I mean, I love psychological thrillers and looking into people's minds, and especially the minds of people that maybe don't think like normal people, and we definitely had that here. It was really interesting to see how a psychopath handles life and handles tragedy, because they do it very differently from a normal person. I will say, I don't know if it was always very accurately represented, but it was entertaining and interesting to me. The way the story wrapped up was okay for me. It didn't blow my mind, but the psychological part was what really triggered me and kept me going. I will say there are a few things here that are not as authentic maybe. Like, there are 2 murders happening on this campus, and campus life basically continues like it always has. It's not like anything is shut down. No, parties are still going on. Students are still living their normal lives. So there are a few things that are not 100% realistic, but what can I say? These psychological thrillers, they are my guilty pleasure. They're like true crime documentaries for other people. I can just, eat popcorn and read these books, and I love them. Is this book gonna win a Nobel Prize in literature? No. Is this book the best I've ever read? No. Is everything authentic? No. But was it entertaining? Oh, definitely it was. So yeah, I had a good time and I give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. All right, the next book I have here is The Immortal Life of Henrietta by Rebecca Skloot. It's a non-fiction book, and let me tell you, it blew my mind. I still cannot believe I did not know Henrietta before this book. And if you don't know either, please read it, because I think everybody should know about her, because she did so much for science and everybody really on this planet. But yeah, who was Henrietta? She was a poor Black woman that grew up in America in the 20th century. And yeah, she had led a pretty normal life at the time under the circumstances. She was a tobacco farmer when she was younger, then moved to Baltimore with her husband and had many children. So all in all, her life went pretty normal until the day when she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. and not just any cervical cancer, but a very aggressive one that was spreading really quickly. So Henrietta, like many people in her position at the time, went to Johns Hopkins Hospital for treatment, because that was the hospital that would treat people without insurance or that didn't have much money. So she went there for her treatment, but yeah, it was a very difficult time, and unfortunately they couldn't really help her, and so eventually she died. But what happened while she was there undergoing treatment was that the doctors at Johns Hopkins took cells, her cancer cells, a sample of them, and sent it to a laboratory, which at the time was trying to grow human cells in the lab. They had tried for a long time, but it was never successful, though. So they have tried many times with human tissue to grow it in the lab, but it was always eventually dying. So Henrietta's cells, they also sent to this lab thinking, okay, this is not really going to be successful, but we're going to try nonetheless. Henrietta's cells were different than all the others before because they did not die. In fact, they thrived in the laboratory and they multiplied, which was a major breakthrough for science, because that meant that now they could do research on actual human cells. And yeah, it led to a lot of inventions like the polio vaccine and other things. So because of Henrietta's cells, there was a lot of breakthroughs in science, and we all profited from a lot of these drugs and pills that were developed. Here's the crux of the story though. The cells at the time were taken without Henrietta's knowledge and without the knowledge of her family. So the family knew their mother died, but they had no idea that part of her lived on in laboratories around the entire world, and by the way, is still living, like her cells are still being used for science. So that is kind of crazy. And also what is kind of crazy is that her cells created a multi-billion-dollar industry while her own family is still living in poverty and suffering, and yeah, does not see any benefits from this whole wonder that her mother's cells enabled. So yeah, the author of this book, Rebecca Skloot, also felt that this was a great injustice, and so she wanted to write this book so that the story gets out there, so that people learn who Henrietta is, the woman behind all these major breakthroughs, and also so that her family learns who their mother really was. And yeah, she writes a lot about Henrietta, but even more so about her family. It's a book about racial discrimination in science and the medical field, especially in the past. I mean, there were some examples in here of studies that were done on Black people that, when you read it, you just shake yourself, and it reminds me a lot of the research that was done in Nazi camps, that kind of thing. So it's horrific, really. And yeah, I learned a lot. Also, this book has really highlighted the issue that, what happens with cells once they leave the body. Once the cells leave your body, does that mean that science can just use them, or does it mean that you still have rights over them? Do you lose the rights? So that was an interesting debate too. Up to this day, by the way, there's no federal law that says that you have any rights over your tissue once it leaves your body. So very interesting, the ethical reasoning in this book, and the ethical debate that you could have after reading this. And so a lot of things are going through my mind when I think of this book. I'm honestly struggling summarizing it, but I hope I did it justice somewhat. One other thing I wanted to say though is that I don't really read much nonfiction, and if you're like me, don't worry about it, because this book really read like a fiction story. I felt like I was following the reporter along and learning about this family, and the characters were all drawn very well. I felt like I was, seeing the person there in front of me that Rebecca Skloot was describing. And so just amazing. What else can I say? I think it's such an important topic that I only can give 5 stars at this point. So if you're into nonfiction or want to give nonfiction a try, pick up The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. The third book that I read is Because Venus Crossed an Alpine Violet on the Day That I Was Born by Monica Hovring. And yes, that is the name, very long, very poetic, and that honestly kind of describes how the entire book was. It is a novel of only 138 pages, and it felt more like a very long poem rather than a short story. But yeah, let me tell you what it's about. It's about two sisters that are reconnecting after a very long time apart. They're going on a trip to not the Alps actually, but to the mountain range in Norway, and they're spending some time in a hotel there together. One of the sisters, her name is Martha, she was just released from a mental health facility, and so she had depression and a breakdown, so she's really trying to, get back to life in a way, and her sister's with her because, of course, Martha shouldn't be alone going through all of this. But her sister, let me just check, yeah, her name is Ella, also has issues of her own. I mean, there's a lot of trauma and a lot of misunderstanding between the two of them. They used to be really tight and really close when they were younger, but then time and decisions in their life pulled them apart. And there's a lot of feelings and frustration and maybe even blame involved. So a very interesting story about family relations, estranged family relations, and of course also mental health. Mental health is a big one. And it was just interesting to read. As I said, it read like a poem, and at times I really felt like I was back in German class in school, where when we read a poem we had to analyze like the meaning of every single word, and every single word meant something. I sometimes felt it here, like I felt like every sentence could be dissected and analyzed. So with that being said, I think it would be a great book to read with friends or with a book club or something, and you really talk about every single passage. I also have to say though that there are a lot of things that I did not really understand, or I feel like maybe I missed them reading over it, just because it felt like a very complex story. So I don't know if I pulled as much out of it as I should have. I also didn't really like the ending of this book, but it was an experience just because of the writing style. So all in all, I think I give it 3 out of 5 stars, but like barely a 3. And as I say, if you like language or poetry, then this I think is the book for you. If you're more interested in a story, then I don't know if I would recommend it. Last but not least, we have Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. I have read The House in the Cerulean Sea last year by TJ Klune, and I fell in love with that book and with the author's imagination, and I gave that book at the time 5 stars. So I was really excited to read another book by his, and I'm finally showing this one, and I'm so happy about it. And just like House in the Cerulean Sea, TJ Klune just proves in this book too how big his imagination is and his creativity. I'm just always amazed about the world that he builds and the ideas that he has in these books. The main character in this book is a man called Wallace, and during his lifetime he was a horrible man. You can't say it any other way. He was very selfish, didn't really care about anybody else, didn't understand feelings, and had no problems being an asshole. I'm sorry, but yes, he was a big asshole during his lifetime, and he is presented with a very peculiar world when he suddenly dies. But instead of just there being nothing after death, he is actually visited by a so-called reaper, which is a young woman, and she brings him to this peculiar house that you can see on the front of the cover. This house is owned by a man called Hugo, and he is a ferryman. So his job and the Reaper's job is really to help people that die transition from life to death. And Wallace, is there now in this in-between world, and is trying to make sense of everything, and slowly comes to realize that maybe he didn't really live a full life, and is maybe hesitant to move on now. The book deals a lot with death and dying and grief and suicide also. So just as a warning, if you have, a trigger, if that's a trigger for you, this is definitely plays a role in this book. But it was so well done, and honestly such a sweet story again. I know TJ Klune, he lost his own partner before writing this book, and so just keeping that in mind made the book so much more meaningful to me, because you could tell that he was TJ Klune was dealing with his own grief in his story, and it was beautiful to see how he views life after death in a way. And I just want to read out this first sentence here in the front. It says, "For Eric, I hope you woke up in a strange place." So Eric is his former husband, I believe. And so, yeah, that I really felt that. When I opened the book and I read that, I was already fully immersed in this story. So yeah, as I said, the story is really sweet, and he always just, TJ Klune evokes this feel-good feeling in me when I read his stories. I will say I have one point of critique, and that is that the story felt very similar to House in Cerulean Sea. Even the characters, I felt like one-to-one, I could say, oh, this character is the same as this character in that story. We also have a queer love story in this book, and also that one felt like took the same journey as the one in House in the Cerulean Sea. So in a way, it didn't feel like anything novel, and I would have liked to see maybe some vast differences and not so much in common. But his story just works. So once I got over the fact that it is the same in some aspects, I really saw the differences after all, and I got immersed in the story. I mean, the last third or 2/3 of this book I think I read in one sitting, because I was so I just couldn't put it down. So all in all, he just did a great job. If you liked House in the Cerulean Sea, I think you will like this too. I mean, I loved it. I still think that House in the Cerulean Sea was a little bit better, but nonetheless a great book. 4 out of 5 stars, and yeah, I love TJ Klune, and I cannot wait to read his new book, which I have on my shelf here. It's In the Lives of Puppets. Excited for that one, and yeah, I just expect another feel-good story where I feel really good after reading it. Alright, so this was my reading month of June. I hope you enjoyed. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and till next time. Bye bye.